Welcome back to another episode of Just a Squirrel Looking for a Nut, trying to get out of this rut. For those that are tuning in right now, one of the first things that you might have been able to acknowledge and notice is that this is probably one of the only times that we've been able to do the name right, and that is at 100% accuracy. And that is because I will be the only one that is part of the two original squirrels on this particular show, but that doesn't mean that we won't have other squirrels joining us. So for Scott Mason, it sounds like I will be continuing on the topic from last week's when we spoke about grief, and that is we'll be grieving your absence today. And as far as the new topic goes around luck, I am lucky to have two other guests or squirrels, if they choose to identify as that for this particular podcast. One is Casey Berman, and the other one is Nancy John. There they are. I am lucky to have the two of you in the same exact space today.
Great to be here. Thanks.
I couldn't help but laugh when I was watching the, in case you were spot on. It happens every single time. And I think, I don't know why it happens. I still haven't figured that out, but just the story that it tells. And I think it directly resembles everything that the show is about. And that's really just trying to find the humor within some of these more challenging and difficult topics and have a more, meaningful and deeper conversation when it comes to that. And so the theme and the topic that I wanted to have a conversation with the two of you today is about this whole topic of luck. And I'll start off by sharing a brief story that I shared with the two of you on the back end. And that is when I first came to the States, one of the first activities that my brother and I were engaged in was playing basketball. So we would go to school, we would come back and do our homework. And then the next thing you would notice is the two of us playing in our backyard for 2 or 3 or 4 hours long. And for 5 years straight, maybe 6, I'm going to say 5 because 6 is a lot longer. 5 years straight, he beat me in basketball. I never won a game. I got close. And I think as year 3, 4, and 5 approached, there were times when I only lost by like 2 or 3 points. But one of the things I used to always tell him after each and every single one of his wins was that he got lucky. Now, there were times, and if he's tuning in right now, please feel free to share what you actually thought. And that is, I felt that he didn't feel appreciated in those moments when I used such words. And now that I look back at the whole situation, I think one of the biggest reasons why I used such words to begin with is probably had a hard time acknowledging the fact that I just lost, especially when the streak got beyond the year. When it went into year 3 and 4 and 5, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to process for that many years straight. But the other part is I don't think I genuinely understood what the word luck meant to begin with. And I had come across this interesting definition of it when I was having a conversation with my uncle a couple years ago. And he said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Now, that's a definition that I can side with. And that's a definition that I think better understand. But I'm curious to hear from the two of you. How do you understand luck to begin with?
Go ahead, Nancy.
So I'll be honest, until coming onto this conversation, I hadn't really given it a lot of thought as to one, the original question was, does luck exist? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I think so. It's just because I hadn't thought about it. But so I'm glad you started off with a definition, because my thought really was, well, I guess it depends on how we choose to define this word or this whatever luck is, like this concept.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel there's multiple definitions of. So there's the one that you mentioned, Oleg, which is preparation and opportunity. meeting. But then I think about when we use this term, for example, you're like just a fortuitous situation. Like, for example, I'm driving somewhere, I'm looking for a parking spot, and I happen to catch the one spot that's available, right? But I didn't prepare for that. I mean, it's just, that is just a thing that happened. So I think sometimes we take coincidence and we call it luck. And sometimes like then we have words like fate, which I think is also similar, but just we can use that. I think fate sometimes gets used a little bit more when there's either maybe no emotion associated with it, or sometimes in a negative term. Like instead of saying bad luck, we can say, well, that's just my fate. So I in that way, I feel that it's just a word that we use to describe situations, like whether good or bad, that maybe we don't have a full explanation for.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. So the idea of like, does it exist? I suppose to the degree that we believe that it exists, and we have termed these items, because coincidences exist, and the idea of something happens and you haven't planned for it, that stuff happens. Like those things, that's life. Like we've all experienced it. So I would say in that sense, it does exist. So that's kind of how, at this point, I'm really curious about where this conversation goes, because that's where I'm starting. Where we end up at the end of this, I have no idea. So that will all depend on how our conversation goes.
How do you process the concept of coincidences while living in a lifestyle where I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I'll speak from my perspective. Like I believe the universe is working with me every step of the way. In knowing that every situation can be a sign or helping hand from some sort of higher power, higher energy, what does coincidence even look like at that point then?
I mean, so yeah, like I do believe that, yeah, I do kind of acknowledge a higher power. That said, I don't know that I necessarily, like sometimes I think, and I don't know whether this is getting into the conversation of luck or coincidence, or I'm not really sure, but let me just talk this out. So I think about the idea of, sometimes I think we feel that every aspect is being, like something is, so if everything is working together, like you said, like everything is working together, that doesn't mean we have to understand all of the workings together. And I think that's how I look at coincidence. For example, like I don't really understand that. How did you and I end up meeting? Like that's, what a coincidence that you do this and I do this and we met. So just because I don't understand it doesn't mean the concept doesn't exist. So I think that's how I look at coincidence and so on. Like it's just one of those things that happen that I can't put a finger on to say I prepped for it or you prepped for it or because of such and such opportunity it came down. It is just a larger working of things that I don't really know how to name. That's how I would look at it.
Casey, how do you understand this concept?
So first, it's bad luck Scott's not here. So if he's listening, I missed the guy. I was hoping he'd be here, but I missed the guy. Nancy, we've got big shoes to fill.
I know. I saw the other squirrel. It had a beard and everything. I'm like, I think that's Scott.
I know. But Oleg, great to see you. Thanks again for having me. Nancy, great to see you. Again, a very easy question, Oleg, that you asked. And
I've known for those.
That's right. Very easy. So my father also told me, Mark Berman, if you're watching, also told me the exact same words, right? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I was smiling when you said that. It may be a generational thing, and it makes a lot of sense. And it explains what luck is for us. So where I'm going with this is that works. But Nancy, you talked about coincidence and you talked about luck, and you mentioned something around it's hard to explain, and I think, or something like that. And for me, luck is something, is a phenomena, is a dynamic, is an energy or something that's literally out of our control, right? I almost equate it to like a leap year or the calendar or that extra day. I mean, why is our year 365 days? Because the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth don't, I mean, 360 would be a lot easier. 400 would be easier, right? But it doesn't. And then we got to add on this day in February every 4, like it's weird, right? And I see that way with luck, that the reason we have such an issue around luck is because we can't control it.
Right.
We just can't control it. And so we say, well, we give definitions like it's preparation meets opportunity. It's like putting a leap year on somewhere so we can just kind of control this thing called the rotation around the sun. It's a little messy, but we have these definitions. And I think, you know, for me, luck, which I hadn't thought that much about, but I was thinking about more preparing here, really gets a bad name, because good luck means, like the story, like you said, you didn't earn it.
Yeah.
Because we have control over earning. I wake up, I punch the clock, and I do something. And bad luck is, ooh, you're wrong, Oleg. The universe isn't working for me. The universe is against me. This place is a prison. You know, Oliver Hobbes was right. I hate this place and all that, right? I told you the world is bad. So how I'm looking, I think luck gets a bad name because we don't understand it. So therefore, and we need to control everything in the world that we can. And when we can't control something, we kind of give it short shrift. And so the way I want to look at luck, and I'm trying to do this, is that not only is it's neutral, you know, we can go good or bad on how you view it, but really I don't want to fight luck anymore. And I'll tell you that if I get a bunch of sales coming in and I win the lottery and I do all this, someone may say, well, Casey, you were lucky. Okay. I don't want to feel badly about it anymore. And so I think that's one thing that, you know, does luck exist? Yes. And I need to repair my relationship with luck to kind of accept it. If someone has an issue with it and says, well, you were just lucky, like your brother, fine, I'm lucky. But I think also what it comes to is I view luck as the intelligence of the universe, to your point, Oleg. I view luck as ease. I mean, think about how lucky you are when you put a sail up and this invisible thing called the wind pushes you. Otherwise, you have to use your energy to row your boat. I mean, all that does is help you preserve your energy to do something else. So luck for me gets a bad name. It's something we try to control and we can't, but really it's about ease. And if anything, it is the ultimate kind of example of how intelligent the universe is.
Why is it 365 days? I'm still stuck on that. I'm going to have a hard time letting go of control of it unless I find the answer here.
Because the earth just does it. I mean, that's just its cycle, and like, damned be us. Like, it doesn't care about us, right?
I think it's interesting. One of the things that you said, Casey, around the idea of perspective, around the idea of luck getting a bad rap, because it really does depend on perspective, right? So, for example, in the situation, your story, Oleg, you had bad luck, your brother had good luck.
Yeah. So
it is the same damn thing is like two different things depending on who's looking at it. So I do think that idea of perspective matters here. And it reminds me of this story. It's actually like this, it's like a parable, I think. I'm not sure, but like it's a story about this farmer who loses, like he has horses, like that's what he has in his farm, and he loses all of a sudden. He had only one horse and he lost it, like it ran away or something. And so the neighbors come to him and say, oh my gosh, like, you know, that's terrible. What bad news, you know? And so he's like, what's good and what's bad? And then the next day, all of a sudden this horse comes back and it somehow brought a whole bunch of other horses with it back into the stable. And so the neighbors come and they're like, oh my God, that's so great. Like what great news. And he goes, who knows what's good or what's bad, right? The next day, his son leaves, like, you know, decides, you know what, Dad, I want to take the horse out for a ride. He takes the horse out for a ride and ends up breaking his leg. Neighbors come back and say, oh my gosh, what bad news? And it's like, well, what's good, what's bad? And so his, you know, because he needed his son to help him with the farming and things like that. A couple of weeks later, the army in the town was coming through because they were basically going to be enrolling all the eligible young men to come into the army. But because his son's leg was broken, they bypassed him. They said, no, you don't need to come on. And so again, it's like, what great luck, like, what great news. And he's like, well, what's good, what's bad? So it's just that all of those situations, depending on at what point you're looking at it and what perspective we have, it's good or bad. So I liked how you said, Casey, that idea of like just shifting perspective matters and how we can look at things. And I don't say that. So I definitely don't want to say that lightly, saying there's never bad news. Like that's not what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to certain pieces that where we think it's, oh, that's lucky, or, that's my fate, it's recognizing, well, there might be something bigger in the works. There's actually a bigger picture that's playing out. We just are not able to see the whole thing right now. And so in that moment, it seems really good or seems really bad. But then maybe fast forward a little bit and you're like, oh crap, that's not what I wanted. Why the hell have you ever taken on a job and you're so excited to take on the job, and when you sit in the role, you're like, why the hell did I want this thing? What am I doing here? I hate this place. And that's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could do that with COVID, right? There's a virus spreading. We're all going to have to lock down. People are dying. Is that good or bad? Mm-hmm. Actually, people have stopped. The environment is repairing. No one's driving their cars. You can actually see the Himalayas from India for the first time. Is that good or bad? But the economies have tanked. Suicides have gone up. Is that good? We could bring it there. And in the farmer's case, it's a great parable. Thanks for reminding me of that, Nancy. What if his son had died and not broken his leg, right? How would he have reacted? So you can go in so many directions, but luck or news is good or bad based on our viewpoint of it.
Mm-hmm. So how do you explain this then? Okay. Nancy just shared this story. Casey, when you were a guest on this show and it was the three of us, you shared the same exact story.
No way.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah, right.
And I was sitting here and I'm like, what is this then? Is that a coincidence?
Yeah.
Or how do you understand that? I mean, literally, Nancy, as you were sharing that word for word, I was backtracking. I'm like, I could have sworn Casey shared the same exact story when we were talking about gratitude.
Yeah.
And so how do you understand that then? The fact that you shared that and he shared that.
Well, here's the thing. Do we need to understand it?
That's a good question.
I mean, do we need to have an answer? Essentially, to try and understand it is to try and control it, right?
Yes.
So trust me, I want to know, like, I'm curious, where was Nancy coming from? Where did she read that? Like, what sort of influences do we have that are similar, right? But do we need to understand it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I really like what you said, the idea of like needing that control. Whether it's a need or a want, right? So we definitely have this want where it's like, now I'm just curious. And I can appreciate that there are times when you're like, I can't let this go. Like this one I need to figure out because I won't be able to live. Like this is gonna like completely ruin the rest of my day. But I think that's exactly what it is this desire to want to know everything. And sometimes, like, it took me a long time to get to a point of not needing to have all my questions answered. I have a really good friend who's actually always been good at that, where he would do this very annoying thing, and he knows he does it, where I'd ask a question, he's like, yeah. That's a good question. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's a good question. I asked it. I want to know the answer to this question. And I remember, like, and this is years, like this was years ago. And just he was just asking me this question about like, why do you need to know the answer to everything? Yeah. And I was like, because like, how else am I like, for me, that was a part of the growth. I just felt that was needed for growth, or that knowledge, that intellectual, increasing that intellectual capacity was needed. But it took me a while, and just then to get to a place, and when we have more conversations now, we laugh about it, where just feeling that comfort of, I don't know the answer. And you know what, right now, I actually don't even really feel the desire to figure it out. Like, I don't really.
I'm happy you brought that up. That's sort of a sign. I don't want to say a sign of maturity. I'm 47 years old, and I don't to think of myself as mature necessarily all the time, but I think that's,
I think yes.
yes. When you talked about it, you know, a lot of the inner growth, the inner work and self-growth and the work that we're doing, I luckily have not had a midlife crisis, but I've questioned things now and sort of where I am in age. There's a saying that says, you know, your second half of your life is sort of unlearning all or most of what you learned in the first half. And I think that's definitely true for me. And so I was doing around money, around relationships, about everything over the past 5 or 6 years, you know, peeling back the layers of the onion. Like, well, how did my parents influence this? And what happened in 1983? And what about this? And there were some really good points of experiences. Like my home was burglarized when I was like 9, and big story was, you know, big thing. Everything was fine. But like that definitely, I mean, I think about it to this day, right? Like that's one of the glaring things I have had growing up. Like, great, like there's an answer there that informed a lot of XYZ in my life, right? But there came a point where I was just searching for like, well, what happened in 1984? And what happened in February 84? What happened in March 84? And so there comes a point where you just say, okay, I've got enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some of this work and answers that I have, whether it's self-growth or whatever it is, and now I'm going to apply it in the moment right now. Right. So I'm not going to get anxious now, because I used to get anxious about XYZ, but that's because I had a feeling of this from my childhood. I've learned it. I move on, because I definitely went down that trap, and it was kind of a level of control. Like, I need to find every answer. I need to know it all. But then you kind of get into this self-development paralysis, and you're never really acting on it. It's almost like academic or theoretical growth. You're never really using it, you know?
Yes.
So.
And I think there's a combination to both. So as both of you were sharing this, these were the things that came to my mind. First, for me, what I started to realize is questioning did become a form of procrastination. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, it's just like the why, the question of why, not only does it always exist, but it can be there every single step of the way. Like, why did this happen the way it is? Why did Nancy just share a story that Casey literally said when he was on this show? You know, what's the reasoning behind that? So that question doesn't have a limit as far as how many times you can ask it. And I found throughout my own journey is that the more questions that I chose to explore, the more questions that I was leading towards. Because there's always a question within a question. And that, for me, has been a great tool, but just a great realization in knowing that there was a point where I have to literally stop asking questions. Like, I know what I have to do to develop this next layer of confidence. I know what I have to do to develop the next layer of courage. I know what I have to do to be X, Y, and Z that I aspire for. The other thing that I found interesting when both of you were sharing your own perspectives is this whole concept of choosing to look at the past, and especially moments where some things were quote unquote unknown. I remember back however many years ago, I would literally blame and guilt myself for not knowing certain things. I don't know if the two of you can relate, or anyone that's listening, that question of how did I not know this? Well, the reality of the matter is you didn't know this because you didn't know it.
Right.
Plain and simple. There's nothing more to that.
Right.
And I would, but in real time, when those moments were happening, I would blame myself. I would look at it through the lens of how did I not know this, or how could I have made X, Y, and Z mistake? Well, recently, when I was reflecting upon the whole thing, what I came up with was now that I know better, therefore I can do better. And I literally started to approach almost every single area of my life through that lens. So instead of me looking at relationships that I took for granted and looking down at myself, damn, why did I do that? I should have reached out to Casey last week. Instead, I waited a month. Or I should have done this. Instead, I should have done that. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. She's an accountant. And I was just telling her the honest truth. I said, you know, when it comes to much of the accounting world, I know like 2%, and the rest I'm just guessing. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you create this, how do you create that? And to me it makes sense. Now whether it's going to make to IRS or whoever down the road, that's a different story. But what I started to realize in that conversation is the importance of that phrase. Now that I know better, I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of constantly looking back and blaming myself for what I didn't know, this phrase actually gave me some comfort with the whole unknown. Because there's so much in life, as the two of you mentioned, that I don't know. I don't know what luck is to a degree. I mean, can I control it? And if so, which portions of it can I control? And what if I can't control any of it, but just my perception of it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this person got lucky. Casey, you mentioned the same exact thing. If you win the lottery, I've actually wondered, and I've heard that from many people. Oh, they just got lucky. Well, no, they worked at it for 25 years straight, and they lived off of tuna salad and noodles and ramen noodles. And then there's just a series of events happen, and they happen to meet the right opportunities. And because of the preparation and all the work that they did. And I wonder, can the same thing be applied to like the concept of a lottery? I mean, think about that. Person goes into a 7-Eleven or wherever and buys a ticket for years upon years upon years. Is that preparation? Is that preparation meets opportunity? And it just happens to be so that the opportunity is not, quote unquote, the same opportunity or how we view opportunity.
Right.
We have a business, we have a client, so we can somewhat easily articulate, like, what is the opportunity? The opportunities for the growth, the opportunities for financial wealth, X, Y, and Z. But with the concept of a lottery, it's like, what is that opportunity? So I have no idea where I went with that, but I hope I sparked some light bulbs within the two of you.
Is walking to the corner store and buying a lottery ticket preparation?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that is. And I go to the source. If you go to the source of it all, which is ourselves, is that, my external world is going to be a reflection of how I feel inside. Now that's all nice and good and touchy feely. What does that really mean? Well, if I'm walking to the corner store and what am I doing it out of? Am I doing it out of fear? Am I doing it out of lack? Am I doing it out of trying to get the easy way out? Am I doing it because the lottery funds the schools and I want to use it as a nice way to raise money for schools? So I think a lot of it goes to where you are, how you're feeling and what your intention is behind it, whether it's preparation. I know a lot of people go to the lottery, I don't think for the most beneficial reasons. I think they do it from a lack. So for me, when it comes to luck, though, again, luck sort of being that leap year, the leap day, if you will, just kind of fitting it in because we don't have the cycles of the world and the universe don't jive exactly with our clean order, if you will. I don't know if it's lucky, and I think that's really just the best explanation that we can give because we don't really have any way to define what it means when someone comes into a windfall automatically. Because when you think about the programming we have, right? No pain, no gain, work hard, make your money. I mean, a lottery is just this crazy thing of passing go and Monopoly and just moving ahead and jumping to the head of the line, which we're not supposed to do. Imagine if it was the de rigueur. I can't say my French well, but imagine if it was not crazy that everything happened with ease in the world. Like, imagine if it wasn't no pain, no gain. Imagine if it was ease, please. I mean, imagine if that's what row your boat gently down the stream. Life is but a dream. I mean, gently down the stream is easy, right? I think we have it all wrong. I think, I know why we have it all wrong. The culture, and I mean, we get into who's benefiting from us all thinking that this is hard, but life should be easy. Why would a God create such a painful, non-lucky world to be in? Why? Why?
That's a really good question.
He or she, it wouldn't. And that's what we have wrong. When Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is inside of us, right? When you talk about Buddha and Zen and even the mystical Jews up in Svat in Israel, it's all about, there's that saying that says, I think the gods wanted to hide the secret to life. I think I've mentioned this to you, Oleg, and said, where are we going to hide it? Well, we put it down under the water. No. They'll get these things called submarines and they'll find it. Well, what if we put it up in space? No. They'll get spaceships and they'll find it. And one of the gods says, I know exactly where to put it. And they'll never look for it. Where? Inside of man. They'll never look inside. And, this is what all the sages, Marcus Aurelius, St. Augustine, Buddha, Mother Teresa, everyone's been telling us, and we don't listen. But the answer, that luck is inside of us. And that is that there's a loving God. Everything is neutral. And we can give it meaning, just like Nancy, the farmer in your story. I mean, he could have given it meaning, or he decided to really give it a meaning of neutrality. That's really the meaning he gave it.
Right.
What do you think amplifies that force?
Which force?
Behind the luck? And I'm going from my lack of understanding here, but just everything that luck resembles. What do you think? Intention, purpose, do those things attract it more?
Nancy, do you have an answer, or I can kind of think of one?
Go for it. No, go for it.
Well, because this is hard. So, Ole, ask it again. What amplifies luck?
What amplifies luck? Like at the core of it, when you think of it as whatever the form is, form of energy, whatever it is it the intention and the purpose that you put towards it that attracts more of it? Mm-hmm. Or is there something else that I can't even think of?
So if we talk about amplify, I mean, amplify, if we define it, you have an amplifier in your music amplifier. I mean, an amplifier really is something that enhances, right? Or enables to grow the sound and so on. So if you're talking about amplifying luck, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like, how do we make more luck? How do we make
attract more of it?
Attract more of it, right? Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So if that's it, then, I think a new age self-development person, law of attraction person would say that you connect with the frequency. If you think luck, if you have luck inside of you, thoughts become things. That is hard for people to believe until you look at, quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And you see that in the world from a scientific standpoint, the metaphysics of it all, meta being, the deeper part of it all, is literally what we see here is a reflection of how we view it, right? So to Nancy's point earlier, it's the perspective. So that's why, Oleg, you write thank you notes every day. Mm-hmm. That's why you do your gratitude journal. That's why I've started it based on what you're doing, because if you're viewing it within a thankful way, you're going to get more of it. And you're not going to get more of it because the thank you store suddenly gave you more gift cards, right? You're going to get more of it because it's how you're thinking that way. You're just seeing more of it. Yeah. And so how do you amplify luck? You literally shake free of the world's a horrible place, and you adopt a mindset, a miracle, a shift in perspective, like Nancy said, of the world's a lucky place. And to your point, Oleg, it's working for me. Mm-hmm. I think that's how you do it. It's pretty simple. It's just so difficult to wake up in the morning and not think to yourself, today's going to suck.
Yeah.
But if you can, you amplify luck.
Yeah.
Nancy, what are your thoughts?
I think the same thing. First off, when you were asking that question, I'm like, man, I think again, we're trying to explain something that I don't know. We're doing like our level best to scratch at something that we obviously don't know the answers to. But yeah, I'm with Casey on that, right? My first thought really was around its perspective. So how is it that you see some people who've had like really shitty things in their life, but they are the most joyous people? And you're always like, how is that possible? Like how is that possible? So I have a friend that I connect with. She's you know, several years older than I am, and we connected through our church, but she's left since then, but I've stayed in touch with her, and she's actually had a really tough life. So she's just with her own like finances, with her personal life, with her like marriage, and then her son has been struggling with like he's an alcoholic. He's been struggling with it like for years. Like it's a battle that's just a cyclical battle. And so we met over the summer last year, and we're having a coffee, and we were just chatting, and she was sharing with me like I'm like, oh, well, how are things going? Like, tell me what's going on in life. And then she said, you know, you know, every day she goes, I spend some time, and I, you know, just make sure I spend time with God, and I say thank you, and I'm thanking Him for helping me through. And I'm listening to her talk, and then finally I just said, I just have to ask you, like, how is it that you're able to have that like have that way of thinking? Because this woman has a really different, like from all senses of what I understand, and I'm looking in, he has a like she's been having a tough go, and she's like, but she was just like, well, in every way she goes, it was basically, she goes, what else am I going to do? Like in every way I have been sustained. Like God has sustained me through all of these things. So in every way I have been fine. So what else am I going to do? And it was just like an interesting thought. And so as we were talking about perspective, that's what came to mind is she should by all senses be the one going, yeah, like this sucks and I wish things were better and, you know, stuff like that. And then I have another friend, like actually I never even thought about it this way, probably around the same age group, and also having some very personal, like has struggled a lot personally. And she has that maybe probably what you would naturally think is more appropriate, like a very sort of things are tough all the time. Like it's difficult all the time. Is either of them right or wrong? Right? Like how can any of us judge that? Like they've had some really tough things happen, but it was just the idea of perspective matters. And I believe that the way we look at something will shape how it gets amplified. So whether that means it's more luck coming or more good news coming, I don't know about that, but it's just that what is that saying? Like what you focus on, like that's what you get, something like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that idea, like just what you stare at, that's what's going to be more, but that's what you really experience the presence of. And I feel that that's what it is with even this idea of, you know, expanding on or amplifying luck. Because in the end, we have these words that we have assigned meaning to all of these things. So at any point we can decide the meaning is going to be different. And so that goes to your point, Casey, about this idea of how do you wake up in the morning and you're like not thinking that it's going to be a terrible day, but you have a different view. But that's just an idea of the meaning we've assigned. And so as easy as that sounds, maybe it sounds actually very simple to be like, well, change the meaning. But we have invested so much time as individuals and collectively around that meaning that to change it means it's not just me changing it, but let's say, you know, let's say we were all close friends or we're part of the same family and stuff. That means I have to change it and have to be a different way with you. And then you're like, well, why are you changing the meaning? That's not what it means. And we all have to be like, it's so interconnected, our meanings around stuff, that it's not easy to do. But to those who do it, they get past that initial, like they get past they do the work to change that meaning. Like they do end up living probably more more fulfilling, more happier, you know, and by their terms, what those things mean. So yeah, I do think it's very much perspective. And as much as we say it, I recognize how challenging it is to do, because it's an everyday work. I don't think I changed my perspective. Like that's it. Like I at least that's not been my experience. It's an everyday conscious work to do that.
To what degree do you believe you can attract? To what degree do you believe you attract your circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, based on what I've shared, I do think there is. Okay, so I sometimes I feel we look at life too individualistic. the reality is that we are more interconnected than we think. So even let's take that lottery example that you gave, Oleg, right?
Mhm.
So again, I'm just putting this out there. I'm not saying this is necessarily always the case, but I wonder, even then, it's a sequence of events that leads to me winning that lottery that goes beyond me buying the ticket and goes beyond me, purchasing whatever numbers. Like there's a sequence of events that leads to that. That's like what happened, why didn't you pick? Like if I did a random pick, why was it that the system has generated these numbers? It's not like I have necessarily picked something to make it happen. So there's a sequence of events. And I say that to say that we are all much more interconnected than we would even like. We're just, so as much as I may choose, okay, Nancy, you're going to focus on these things. This is the direction I'm going to go. This is the work I'm putting in. My outcome is not 100% controlled by just my input. There are a lot of other inputs that go into that I may not want to have all of these inputs, but that's the reality of life because we're all interconnected. So I do think that, yes, we have the ability to attract certain things towards us, and we do, right? If you think about, for example, if you're constantly an angry person, chances are you probably attract people. Like you'll notice the people that you attract are the people that you push away from yourself. Like there's this magnetic effect that's happening. But all that to say, though, is like, but that's not the only thing. Like I do feel that it's not just me attracting. I am also part of a larger continuum, a larger kind of connection that's around us. So I don't think it's going to be completely everything in your control. And that's true. I mean, we've already shared this, right? That's the reality of life, is like, as much as we want to say that I have controlled every single input, that means the output should be X. That's just
right.
We'd want that. Like I would love that. But that would just mean that we're very disconnected. And I'm like, that's not the reality. The reality is we are connected, and you have your family connections, you have your friend connections, but then you have this community, and then you have these other people you don't know. Like it's a bigger connection than maybe we even want sometimes, but we're too interconnected for it to be just an individual contribution. So I would say, yes, we can attract, but it's not fully controlled. But it's not just me that's involved in that.
I was just thinking about that the other day. I mean, in regard to the circumstances, and this is a topic that's been kind of at the forefront of my life and my mind, and understanding to what degree do you attract them, and to what degree. And I've read quite a bit as far as the perspectives come. You're born into a set of circumstances you can't control, and blah blah blah. But what if that was the result of your parents attracting those circumstances into your life due to the things that they've been through? So I think what you just mentioned, as far as all of it being interconnected, there's a lot of truth within that I see. Yes, I might not have been, quote unquote, in control of the circumstances I was born into, but it doesn't mean that my mom or my dad didn't attract those circumstances into their lives due to their actions, due to the things that they were doing. So I think it seems like there's just this never ending circle, of like how things happen. And just it reminds me of this movie. I don't know if the two of you have seen it. I have seen it. I'm just blanking out on the title here. Adjustment Bureau. Have you seen it? With Matt Damon? It's fascinating film because it dives into this whole concept of events being interconnected. Like one event, kind of like the butterfly effect. One event happening here halfway across the world somehow impacts this thing. And I know that this is a conversation Casey and I had on a separate episode when we were talking about grieving about lost opportunities, or grieving about opportunities that later on perceived to be unlucky or lucky, depending on the circumstances. And I think it's the same exact thing. And maybe at the end of the day, what I'm choosing to learn from this conversation is, what can I really control at the end of the day? What do I think I control? Because there's a difference between even that, thinking that you control, and knowing that you control, whatever that knowing looks like?
So yeah, I mean, to that question around what you can control, there's the phrase like Nancy mentioned, you can really only control how you react to things and what your perspective is. Another way of saying it is you control how you view the world, the choice you want to make. Do you come from love or fear? Do you view the world as a classroom and something to look at, learn from, or do you view it as a prison? To Nancy's friend who was just befallen with all of those tragedies, she easily could have said, "This is a prison. I'm being punished every day. I hate it. I want to kill myself." And people do think that way. And they may not literally kill themselves, but they live in depression or woe is me. Then you've got people who are kind of the outliers who, sure, they get down and they cry, but I think Nancy said it eloquently, what choice do I have? What else am I going to do? I don't want to view the world as a prison. So I'm going to listen to that little voice, and I'm not going to celebrate that my house burned down and have a party for it. But at the same time, okay, what can I learn from this? And that ironically is they're the outliers in our world. That's why we make fun of positive people and touchy-feely. We make fun of them and they're goofy. There is literally an association that happiness equals non-intelligent. I mean, intelligent people are skeptical, don't smile much, they wear black. I mean, you know that. And these are stereotypes, which are stereotypes, and they're also perpetuated everywhere. There came a point where I remember in my 20s, I was reading the New York Times from back to front, even if I didn't want to read it. I just wanted to know everything because I thought that's what I want to do. And the New York Times, it wasn't until my daughter was born where it said all the news that's fit to print. And I said, no, you're like, the front page is full of coups and rape and wars. I just said, even the New York Times, which is the standard, right? I said, New York Times, you know what? You're not all the news that's fit to print. You're bumming me out. I canceled my subscription. And so it really comes down, the only thing we can control is that choice. Do we go and some people would say align with God, like your friend did? If you're not into institutionalized religions, do I align with the universe? As you mentioned, Oleg, that the universe is working for me or is it against me? You could win the lottery tomorrow. Great luck, right? Good luck, bad luck. IRS comes after you the next week. All of your friends come after you. You get shot because people know you won the money and they want to steal it from you. I think the other thing, and I use that lottery.
Damn, I don't want to win the lottery anymore now.
Right? The lottery example, because it's easy. It's the first thing that came to mind. And I think it belies one of the main metrics that I and society use and how we measure ourselves, which is money. And so law of attraction really comes down to how can I bring more money or love in my life? And that's really all we really think about. But if you look, so to your other question, to look around, do I believe in law of attraction? Absolutely. But I look at my life and I say, I really feel like Casey, have my foot. We mentioned this. I have my foot on the brake and the gas at the same time. I have a split energy just in my personal work. I think I take one step forward and 0.75 steps back. And so I look at my life. I live a good life, but I'm not all on the gas, because we know what all on the gas would look like, from work, personal, and so on. And so, yeah, I am definitely attracting it. But now look, I'm on a podcast with two fantastic people. This is my second time on it. Oleg and I connect. Scott, Nancy, I'm connecting with you. And I look at the other things that are coming my way, which aren't necessarily financial. I can't put them on a P&L statement. But then I say, how did I attract this? How did this happen? And I must, if you go back, and I must have really felt like this is the time for me to become a speaker, to connect with different people, to open up and expand. So it's easy to focus on law and attraction that is just money or love or one or two other things, because those are the main metrics we see on TV and we see in TV shows. But I think law of attraction is definitely working for us. We don't really pay attention to what's in our life for good, for beneficial or not beneficial.
Nancy, what are your thoughts on that?
don't know what else to add to that. I feel like Casey really hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I do think what we think about, we bring about. I think there's some saying like that.
Yeah.
I also am very, like, I want to be cognizant of not simplifying everything either, right? And I think sometimes that's what happens when we try and answer some of our questions. We do what you were talking about, Casey, at the very beginning. We're trying to control it and be like, this is, so just based on experience and what I know to this point, there's more to come, I'm sure. I would say, yeah, it does matter what we think about. We do, like that. I actually had this really, so this is why I think the timing of this conversation is awesome. Coincidental, perhaps. I was actually chatting with my own coach. We're actually, close as well. And we were chatting about just how this idea, like it started from a conversation on communication, like getting better with communicating, but communicating in a way where, for example, I can disagree with someone without holding a judgment about that person, or make a decision that, oh, you know what, Oleg, like maybe we're not a good fit to work together, but that actually doesn't mean anything about you, and it doesn't mean anything about me. It's just that we're just not a good fit. And I realized that was something that I was not easy for me to do. Like, I was finding that I had a judgment about this person as well, while I was saying no fit or no whatever, like whatever the end decision was. So we were just having a conversation around that. And so we got into this piece around how we process information, like what goes in, like what we actually take in. It was just really amazing to think about, holy smokes, like how much we like filter, like how we filter through things. It just made me go like, what the hell are we actually, like, what's the reality of what's actually happening?
Yeah.
Versus what I'm actually thinking about and what I'm doing. So we just talked about, what's the stimulus that our body actually takes in. So it was something ridiculous, like 11 million bits or something more. It's actually, she goes, I think the number is more now as research is getting better. She goes, but at the end of it, what we actually, like, once it goes through filters, it's 126 bits on this end. So it's like, well, what's happened? So there's this stuff that we're filtering through. We're either deleting things, we're distorting it, or I don't know, there was like one other thing, like we're just, but the things that go into doing that is our experiences, our memories, our belief systems, like all of those things cause us to. So then when we talk about, what do you believe about this? Or what do you think about, law of attraction and stuff? It's like, well, I mean, at this point, this is what I think about it, but that's based also on my experiences.
Yeah.
And I feel, so this is one of the, I mean, I've said this to you before, Oleg, like one of the things I admire most about you is you ask, like, you're very curious, so your ability to ask questions. And I feel that more of us can benefit from doing that, because that's how you can actually rewire some of the filtering process, so that it's not always, well, this is the only way I've experienced it, so that means this is so. And it can be that there's another way of looking at it, and that requires us to just take a step back and go, okay, that's how I've experienced it, but perhaps there's another way around it. Now, sometimes we're not ready for it, and that's completely okay, right? Like there's a time, like we talked about questions, there's a time to be like, I just need to live life. I can't be questioning everything every second of my life and not actually be living. So there's a time to live it. But when it comes to the judgments we make and things like that, I'm just recognizing the importance of being able to be like, okay, what's caused me to think that way? But I think this is where, though, sometimes we get stuck in the being too intellectual about it. So when we talk about like, well, what is this? Like, is there law of attraction? Is there luck? Then we can become super intellectual about it. And so your point, Casey, about the fact that we think it's foolishness when you see somebody always happy, you think that, oh, look, I think positive. You're like, oh my gosh, this person is so hokey, right? It's like, why do we do that? And I think our true intelligence is a component of both of those items, like the ability to pay attention to the fact that either I'm not feeling good about something, like those are things that are triggers for us to ask questions about. And I think that's where we can kind of reevaluate, okay, what do I actually believe about this? And why do I believe this way? And we can reevaluate it. so we can have both of them. I just feel like sometimes we've opted for one or the other, and I think it's just more popular. Like critical thinking it's a hugely important skill set. I am all for critical thinking. We need to have more critical thinkers around. But sometimes we miss the going a little bit deeper to the feeling components. I do think there's an opportunity to do both of those things.
Yeah.
But our ability to do that requires us to recognize that our beliefs around all of these things are based on, it's really based on our history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has also been framed when we were really young. So Casey, your story about 9 years old, I had this experience and I realized how much that experience has impacted me.
Yeah.
So then we think about, well, how does that play into how you view luck? How does that play into how do you view perception around what's good and what's bad, and all of those things affected. So I think in the end, this question is one of those, I would say it depends. Based on where I am now, here's how I'd answer it. Ask me again, like maybe 6 months from now, maybe I'd have a different experience. I think that's the part where when I say what you think about, you bring about it, I'm cognizant of that, because sometimes I know that can simplify some very hard living for people and make it seem like, well, it's your fault that you are where you're at. And I definitely don't, I'm not looking to do that either. So it's because I feel like there's a combination. That's why I mean, it's so interconnected. There's a combination of things that happen in terms of our circumstances. So I don't know. I feel like I kind of went into I might have broadened this conversation much wider than you were intending, Oleg. My apologies for that.
The angle of law of attraction and it's your fault is a real tough one. And so that's a difficult way, because you can go there and say, well, your circumstances are bad. You brought it onto yourself. How I view that is rather, what can I learn from this? Yeah. So when you have a tragedy or you live in poverty, what can I learn from this? And it's tough to say people who live in non-developed countries who are living in squalor, but it may not be what can they learn, but what can we all learn? Because to your point, Nancy, we're all collected here. I mean, we think we're great and we're individuals, and Casey and Nancy and Oleg and Joe Biden and everybody. I mean, we're in a petri dish. We are one big collective organism on this earth. There's a few things that have come up. I mentioned in the beginning, just the second half of life is unlearning the first. And there's something, you mentioned our perspectives, Nancy. There's something called the Shoshin method. It's Japanese, and it's actually something we do with corporate clients if they have an issue, and we do workshops where we help them kind of free their mind of all pre-existing thoughts so that they can really be innovative and creative. And well, wait a minute, if we could just fix it this way. And so Shoshin, I think in Japanese translated, means the beginner's mind. And so there's an element as you get older that we can really think we're the expert and we know everything. And while my ego, Casey's ego, wants to be known for that, there's a tension inside of me to be the beginner and to let go. And so I opine and give ideas and so on when we're talking. But I think there's an element of me of just emptying my mind of my preconceived notions, which is so hard to do, because as you said, Nancy, I have an identity. We all have an identity. I mean, those groups of people that are just great to complain and bitch with, and that's why you get together with them, to complain. If you didn't complain, really, what's the point of going to coffee with them anymore, right?
That's so true.
So that's part of it. And I tell you, I mean, there are people out there I don't hang out with that much because I don't complain anymore. I don't want to be around it. And they look at me like he's just some trying to be happy, freaky guy. But it is difficult, but you either fully empty your mind, which I think only the Dalai Lama and Gandhi and MLK, Mother Teresa could do, meditating, or some of the monks in Tibet or Southeast Asia, the Buddhist monks, or what you do for the rest of us is who don't have that power, that enlightenment, is you just see our thoughts and let our thoughts be there, but realize that you're not your thoughts.
Yeah.
So when the overwhelm comes, or like those thoughts and beliefs that you were talking about, they're going to be there. I'm not going to resist them, but I just I have to let them be and let them move on. I'm just the observer of my thoughts.
Yeah.
How do you want others to know you?
Who is you? Who is the
You.
me, right? Well, so it's an interesting question because I can ask it in two things. There's one, if we all are connected, like Nancy said, then that means we're all God. We're all the universe. We're all.
Mhm.
So if I look into your eyes and see the energy of the divine being experiencing this life and just being here, it's really freaky and weird, but also it makes sense that we're all just here hopefully in the moment and experiencing things. So I would love for certain people to know me as them, and that we're all connected, and that
Mm.
so one way to look at it is how do you react to someone, whether it's a politician you hate or whether it's a mass murderer or whether it's a crying kid, is they're either giving love or calling for love.
Mm-hmm.
And in both situations, the thing that we can do, how we react, the only control we have over is to give them love. Is to give them. It doesn't mean you get walked on, doesn't mean you acquiesce, but it means you give compassion, your understanding, right? So if I were to say at the high level it's that. I think for me, Casey Berman, I think my legacy, I don't know, like Nancy said, it may change tomorrow, but I think right now in this moment in time, I would want people to think of me as fun to be around, engaging, like nice to be around. I think also it would be it would be curious. I think curious. Oh look, I picked that up for you. Just curious. I know people, I would want to say, well, they come to me for advice and I can help and I'm the rock and I'm strong and I'm smart and I help. There is that certain element, but I think the more I go down there, that's really just me kind of aligning with an identity of Casey as opposed to things. Because if I'm curious and I'm fun to be around, those aren't that sexy or glamorous, but I think it's more connected with other people. So,
and I'll agree with you. I think you're not so bad to be around or to have a conversations with,
Thanks. Right. Thank you. I'm learning from you. I've been writing thank you notes and writing what I'm grateful for. And it really shifts. I mean, the things that I wrote down, Nancy, I'll let you answer that too. But I mean, real quickly, the things that I wrote down were, I was thankful for an email that someone sent my daughter that made her very confident. I was thankful for a friend of mine who was very supportive. Things like I was thankful for our Friday meeting. Little things like that I wrote down, and they weren't that big. I wrote it down this morning, but it just set my day on a really good foot. And when I looked at them, the theme through all the 5 bullet points of what I was grateful was there was a connection with someone there. As opposed to being, I'm thankful for my new espresso machine or something, right? So it isn't horrible, but they were more the connections with other people.
Yeah. And I think it changed. I mean, you're spot on. I think gratitude really does. I can only speak from my perspective, but there are a couple of things that actually, Nancy, you had mentioned. That's why, I'm going to stop trying to control the situation and believe I know what I know, because at this point, I don't even know what I know, to be honest with you. But it's just this whole concept of like life flowing through you. And I don't know if the two of you or anyone that's listening right now can experience this or has experienced this, but sometimes you'll have like a circumstance or an event at the very beginning of your day or something that still carries over from previous day or previous week. And then every single conversation you have, somehow the theme of that event or circumstance is within that. I mean, I'm connecting you with someone halfway across the world. They've never met me. They don't know anything. And somehow they're touching upon the same exact point that I'm experiencing in the same exact moment.
Yeah.
And so when you were mentioning this whole concept of judgment and questioning, one of the things that I have found myself doing, and it's not necessarily a conscious judgment as far as I'm better than this person, but it's more so just a realization and understanding that it's okay to view life through multiple different lenses and perspectives.
Yeah.
And one of those was I recently came across a comment. I don't remember if it was on one of the posts I put out there or I made a comment on someone else's post. And it's this whole concept of we. And the person said, we need to do this or we need to do that. And I just immediately thought of like, okay, hold up. Who's we and why do we need to? Okay. Is it you that needs to do that? Because I don't feel like I need to do that. And I realized in that moment, I have a choice. I have a choice as far as just completely spilling and opening a can of beans and letting it go whichever direction. Or I can just process this set of circumstances on my own time. You know, I don't have to respond to the person by responding to that message on LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever it was. Rather, I can respond internally. And Casey, you mentioned this one time and I couldn't help but just laugh the whole time. You know, when you talk to yourself, like oftentimes the outside world looks at you as like, okay, this person's, there's something off. Yeah. There's something that needs to be changed or fixed. Well, I found myself when I started to follow this journey and the breadcrumbs going from one book to another and then ultimately becoming the person that I am today, I'm talking to myself a lot more often. I'm serious.
Yeah.
But I don't think of myself as crazy anymore. Like, in fact, I've kind of embraced the craziness of that because of that quote. I don't know who said it, Steve Jobs or whoever. It's the crazy ones that change the world. Mm-hmm. And then there's another quote that a person had shared with me. I want to say it was in like a LinkedIn recommendation that I asked or something like that. And she said this, and she said, there are some people that there's some people that are born and that are simply walking the world. And then she referred to me, she said, and then there's some people that are born to change the world. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I found that interesting because here's this whole concept, like me talking to myself, and the more information I consume, the more that I'm talking. You know, I'm literally having a best friend everywhere I go. And I found it's fascinating because now I'll do it in public sometimes. And my friend would turn and be like, what? We weren't talking about that. Like, yeah, that was an internal dialogue. you are not a part of that. Don't worry. Yeah. But there is something to be said when it comes to the judgment. There's something to be said when it comes to the judgment that gets passed on and the choice and the decision that I believe every single one of us has. Now, whether or not we're aware of it, that's a different conversation. But it's like there are other ways that one can process the judgment. And I will also say this, that in my opinion, in some situations, judgment is another one of those that gets a bad rep. It's okay to judge in certain circumstances. I mean, let's face it. Evaluating a decision, it's a form of judgment. Choosing between a yes or no, whether it's buying or whether it's engaging with someone on a platform like this, that's exercising your judgment. Mm-hmm. So I think going back to maybe how we even started this, it truly is a matter of perspective. Mm-hmm. And what is the meaning that you choose to give to it?
Yeah. And when it comes to luck, definitely. So it exists, and it exists in our perspective, right?
Yep. Yeah. It exists because we believe it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as that. So we have officially cracked the nut around luck. And
well, actually, we've just identified that there is a nut, is what we've done. That the nut is there. We have cracked nothing.
But it's a construct, right? Mm-hmm. Money is a construct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that pain is a construct. Mm. So things are more painful in certain cultures than in others, right? Think about that.
What is a construct? Can you define that? Or how do you understand a construct?
Yeah, well, obviously construction is something built, right? And it's a mental or emotional construct that is a framework for us to understand the world. So longitude and latitude are constructs. Constellations are constructs. Orion's belt, those three stars are not near each other. But we need a way to map the heavens.
Right.
The longitude, Tropic of Cancer is not there. right? It's a construct. Money is a construct because it's easier than barter, you know, the whole story where money came from. But what is it? We believe $10 is worth more than $20 is worth more than $10 because we believe it.
Yep.
It's circular, but that's the cognitive dissonance of human beings. And we all agree not everything makes sense, but we're still going to move forward. So luck is a construct in the sense of like a leap year day, you know, like I can't really describe this and I'm either too dumb or there's no way to do it because I'm not God, even though we all are. I'm just going to call it dumb luck, bad luck, good luck. So, and that's okay. Like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay when we feel it's okay with it, but that goes to the earlier point that we talked about is we have to give up control and stop answering it. Now, some people like answering it. I know, you know, the Talmud, which is the Jewish commentary over thousands of years on the Torah, on the 5 books of Moses, served a great purpose when the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, you know, 30 years after Christ died. Jews didn't have a homeland, so it kept everyone together, that education over millennia, 2 millennium. A lot of people love just the intellectual theory about it, you know, and it was fun, and the rabbis would just go back and forth and talk about it. But beyond that, like, you know, it was very theoretical. Like you just it's just what it is. Like we may just never get to the bottom of it. Yeah. So I think when we realize these constructs that we live in, like water to a fish is a construct. If you ask a fish, well, how's the water? The fish is going to say, what water? If you ask us, think about this now, talking about difference, because crazy is just another word of being different. But if you could do that, then African-American people are crazy. And Jewish people are crazy in certain scenarios because they're different. I mean, think about the water we swim in now, where the racial and Black Lives Matter and the diversity that's happening. I mean, this is all great, but I think it is such an indication of the mother culture of the water we live in that we even have to question these things.
Yeah.
Right? Who's subhuman, who dresses in a certain way, right? I mean, the NBA, the basketball, I'm a big sports fan, they put in a dress code, suit and tie or blazer and something. The 99% of all the players are African-American. They don't dress that way. They don't want to dress that way. But here they're being forced to by old white men who run the league because they know where the money comes from, the owners. I mean, it's so just... And luckily the players called it out, but that's the water we swim in, right? It's a construct.
Yeah.
Why is North America on the top of I mean, you literally could have the map the other way where Patagonia is the North Pole.
Right.
Why? Well, we know who drew the maps. Europe wants to be on top.
Damn. Well, there goes that theory for me.
Right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean white people are better. I mean, you go into credit and taxation, and LLCs were founded in the Netherlands in early 1600s. They were just able to spread the risk. People raised this thing called money, and they built ships. Like, that's it. It wasn't that, you know, the Netherlandish were any better than like the Zulu tribe in Africa. The Zulu tribe in Africa didn't raise money. They just had a totally different water they lived in. They were content. They just hunted. They had bounties. The weather was great, right? They didn't need to go explore somewhere. The reason Europeans went somewhere is because the winters were so bad. And they wanted more plunder and spices that Marco Polo went. Who knows? But it's the water we live in. And I think that's one thing, the unlearning, the beliefs. Like I'm literally trying, it's so hard, but I'm literally trying to just pop my head up and see if there's other waters that I can view the world in. So,
and I mean, I'm with both of you on that one. I think it is a challenge for sure. What that challenge looks like for each of us is completely different. I know I've realized throughout my own journey is awareness is one thing, putting it into action is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And I chose to believe the other way around, that I thought that, oh, I just got to get aware and the rest is good. No, it develop the awareness, but then it's actually putting it into practice and walking the talk, so to speak. And I'm also at a point where it's interesting that we're even having this conversation. So prior to us having this dialogue, I was researching the trip I'm going to go on. And one of the things that I was looking into was in Thailand, 10-day silent meditation. So I found this place and I texted one of my friends who had gone to the same exact place. The interesting thing about it, you can't register in advance. Can't register online. You've got to show up. You've got to be there. Talk about like commitment. Not one of those where you just register for an event like, oh, I'm going to go watch Golden State Warriors play or whatever, and then something else comes up and you just like, okay, whatever. That was $50 or $35. This is, you actually have to fly there, get there the night before, and then you probably have to stand in line. And then there's also the possibility that if it's too many people, well, half the line doesn't make it. So I'm texting my friend and I was like, is this true? Like, is this how this particular part of the waters in the world works? He's like, yeah. So just thinking about that and understanding how truly different everything is, it just made me think about this whole concept of truth and how, what is the ultimate truth? I don't know what that is. I think the truth evolves so much. And both of you were saying this, Nancy, you were saying that whatever you know about luck today may be different from 6 months. Probably. That's just the reality of the matter. Depending on the conversations you have, depending on how you process those conversations, and depending on what other influences are going to impact that. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably the same exact way. And I've learned a lot throughout this journey, and just whatever I knew not even a year ago, whatever I knew a month ago. And I think there's a truth in this statement. I don't remember who said this to me, but I truly didn't understand the meaning behind it until recently, that whatever got you here may not get you there.
Sorry.
And I just thought it was so profound because it's so true. Like, however I understand luck, however it is that I'm trying to amplify and attract more of it and all this stuff, like at the end of the day, do I even know? Or am I just convincing myself that I know to gain some control over the journey? And just the reality of the matter is, even thinking about the day today, woke up at 7 o'clock and it's already 7 p.m. Like, what? Where did the time go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about the intentionality and everything. Like, was I intentional? Was I doing this and was I doing that? Well, for me, Thursdays, I take off. I try not to work. So that's another thing I got to go through. I think I'm not working, but the reality of the matter is I'm probably working more on Thursday than any other day. And what I mean by that is I'm working to gain a peace of mind that it's okay not to work. Mm-hmm. It's okay not to check the email. It's okay not to do the post. It's okay not to do that. So I'm doing even more work on that day, and yet it's called the day off.
Yeah.
How does that make sense? Like, what?
Yeah.
So
you said something earlier about like the choice component, and I think that a lot of what we're talking about is just like everyday living.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're just bringing to conscious thought right now and awareness some stuff that all of us do, just everyday living. So you mentioned that idea of like awareness, and so as I think about us becoming aware of something, so even your questions are like around like, okay, so today is supposed to be a day of rest or a day off, but I'm spending the day working on not working on all these other things.
Like, so counterintuitive.
Yeah, but again, like it's that thing of like, so you said, I'm not figuring that out. And so the question then becomes as well, okay, well, what sense are you making of that, right? Because in the end, it's still what you choose to assign to it.
Yeah.
Like us working towards something, again, it's that word working. It seems I'm grinding, I'm like working at something, but that's because that's how we look at work.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen people who love their work and just love it and love doing their work? They don't feel like they're grinding. So I think there is a place, again, it's just this associations that we have and how we choose to use them.
Yeah.
But when you had shared about the letting go to, like, what got me here won't get me there, that idea of letting go, there was this one thing that I had seen a few years back. There was a show called I Can't Believe I Survived, or something like that. It was just stories, harrowing stories of people who either got lost in the Amazon for a few days and they survived, or somewhere up in the Arctic, and things like that. And there was this one story of this man who got shipwrecked, and he was in some like ocean, or like, anyways, deep waters, and how he survived, I don't know how many days, but several days in the ocean, and finally made it to safety. But he's in that story, what you saw was he happened to, when they got like when his boat collapsed or whatever, there was a plank of wood that he was able to hang on to that kept him buoyant and able to kind of survive, like having like basically the waves and the deep waters, and he was able to make it through. And then finally, at a certain point, he could see land across. And so as he was getting closer, what he was realizing was that when the waves go in the opposite direction, like the tide that would hit the shore, by the time it kept pushing him out. And what he realized was, this plank of wood that has kept me alive this long, I must let this plank of wood go and swim. He needed the force of his swimming. He could no longer hang on to this thing. And it was such an aha moment that at that point to say, oh my gosh, the thing that kept him alive this long is going to kill him if he doesn't let it go. And his fear, he was like, what if I let this go?
Yeah.
Like I have no, what, I'm going to die. Like that was this thinking, like I'm going to die. But then he just realized, he goes, but I definitely am going to die if I don't let this thing go. And he let it go and just like had to put, of course, the force of swimming to get across there. And that was like such a lesson for me to just to say, okay, yeah, like there are times when the good things, it's not always that they're not always bad things that we're letting go. Sometimes I think that's where also, when I said, sometimes I have to figure out how not to judge the thing or the person or whatever it is that I feel like I need to part ways from, or just make a different decision on. It actually has nothing to do, like it doesn't make it good or bad.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of times there's like the things we let go are like the really good things. So Casey, you brought up this idea of, our focus around all, working hard, and, I think you said, that idea of just like, you have to put in the effort, like you have to put in the work. I mean, yeah, like the idea of work ethic is a great thing. Like think about how many of us, like even especially if you think about generations prior to us, like the idea of work ethic, I think was really instilled in us based on that. And that's not a bad thing to have good work ethic. It's just that you realize at some point how I look at work and how I've defined myself, and the fact that I've attached myself to this ethic and this idea of striving.
Right.
How is that still serving me, or serving the people around me? Is that in service anymore? And it's not that all of a sudden striving becomes bad, or that working hard becomes bad, because there's a time to climb. Like, of course, there's a time to climb, but it's just kind of recognizing at this stage, I may have to let this go, or I may have to redefine this. And it's okay if this person next to me doesn't want to redefine it, because they're in a different path at this point. But yeah, like I feel that it's just, I feel that's the place where judgment it can be a problematic if we feel that it has to be either or. And it's not so. It sometimes it's like the really good thing. And I think those are the times I have found it harder to let it go, is when it's like, this is actually a really good thing. Why am I having a hard time like embracing this anymore? I just can't embrace it anymore. And so that makes me question my thought process around it. But yeah, like I think to your point, like there is a time to let go, because sometimes the things that served us will actually kill us if we continue on with them any further. But yeah, that's what really resonated for me.
What a beautiful story. I mean, that gave me chills. I wrote that down. What it made me, what it made me think also was, and smack me if I'm going way too far, but is, why is death so bad?
Oh,
Hear me out.
yeah.
We're always killing things off. And you have fun time on the holiday, right? You're on holiday somewhere warm and you meet this couple or a family, and do you get their number and call them later and back home in the States? Do you just let it be, right? Let it die because it was supposed to be in Mexico or Hawaii, wherever, and that's it. I've seen it with my children when we go to the playground and they meet someone and you want your kids to have friends. Do you have a play date after with these people you just met at the park, or do you just leave it as a time at the park, right? And Nancy, it's huge. And so, well, you talk about the wood, and literally the wood died. He let it go, and that whole experience died. And maybe that's how your friend that you mentioned earlier had those tragedies. Maybe the viewpoint is, why is death so bad? We celebrated Halloween. A lot of, Dia de los Muertos, they celebrate death. There's skulls everywhere. Why do we need to view it? That's another water we swim in, right? That's another mother culture that we live with. It's another way for us to control. Right. And so I think it's beautiful that, when you talk about the change and the story of the wood, and what he really did is something died and he was okay with it. And there was that initial fear where he had to let go of the wood, and is he going to sink? Is something going to happen? And he sort of had faith, but I think also he realized it's okay to die.
Yeah.
So.
And it brings up another point. I mean, obviously this is a conversation that we can have forever, but as far as just final remarks, what it made me think of when it comes to this question, and it's a really good question as far as why is death so bad? Because if you really think about it, at least from my perspective, I'll speak for myself. I kill off things every single day. I kill off thoughts. I kill off behaviors. I kill off patterns. I kill off the interactions, the groups that I choose to be a part of, the opportunities that I choose to be a part of in life. And then yet there's this whole concept that, it's quote unquote the worst thing that could ever happen. But the reality of the matter is it's happening. It's not going to happen. It's not if, and it's not even necessarily when. It's happening now.
Yeah.
It's happening every single moment. I mean, the conversation we're having right now, we could use completely different language if we wanted to. We can use completely different set of words, but we're making decisions based on who we are, how we believe to be representing ourselves, what we stand for, all these other factors that are part of the quote unquote killing process. The killing of the thoughts, the behaviors, perception. Oh, if I say this, how are others going to perceive it? How am I going to be viewed? All this other stuff. So just one thing that I wanted to close off with, and, it's slightly, I guess you could say, personal question. I'm not going to buffer it, whichever way you want to answer that. But your own life, your own experiences, what do you have to let go of? One thing that you don't believe is serving you in the current moment. Because as much as I believe that this is a space for all of us as a collective to come together, and it is, I also believe that right now this is a space for the three of us as well. Because we are on our own journeys, and that's just what I believe in. So I just want to open that up to the two of you, whoever wants to crack that nut first. What do you have to let go of that's going to help you get to the next step of wherever you're trying to go to?
I can go. I actually have something. So one of my, I think I don't know if I've shared this with Oleg before, but I kind of like start off my year and I usually have like an intention or like a prayer I put forward, and a component of that, like there was a receiving component of it, which was being more open to love, expanding my capacity for love, which was a combination of receiving it as well as being able to give it, was a combination. But attached to that required me to let go of something, which was the approval of others.
Mm.
It's not a new awareness for me. I've known this, but you talk. So this is again coincidental, Casey. You use some language that I have been using a lot recently, which was this idea of second half of life. And I do believe that, if we're lucky enough to kind of get into that second half, which I did recently. So I think I'm just like, oh, I feel like this is kind of where I'm at, where I'm thinking about stuff and I'm like, okay, does this make sense? And so I think it's part of that journey that made me really recognize how much this approval piece plays into my decision making. I would say my decision making in big ways. And so that's an area I want to let go of. But the reason I connected it to love is that I think too many times in life we can go either or. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of saying it's either this or either that. And so for me, it's the idea of like, how can I have both, where I let go of this need for approval while expanding love. Both I know can coexist. They exist very well together. And so that's actually what got me into this journey of like, well, how do I communicate in a way that I can say this is not a good fit or no or whatever, but has nothing to do with the person. Like it's not a judgment. Right. It's not a statement about the person. It doesn't take away the wholeness, the worthiness of that person. I don't see them any differently. I can still love, but I can also say no. And I can also say, no, that's not the way we're going to go. That's not a direction we're going to go in. So for me, that's a really, really big one. I don't think it's a quick one either, but I'm just grateful that I'm not just aware of it, that at this point, I'm also willing to action it. And I'm actively moving in that direction to be able to make that happen. So that's a big one for me.
Casey?
Yeah, I think I know I have an attachment to how I want to succeed. I'm worried about the how. It has to happen a certain way, and this business or that way. And so what I've done recently, meaning yesterday, is I started writing my own vision, my corporate vision. I did it for Leave Law Behind, my company, and I'm going to do it for myself. And really a vision is, Apple has one, Google has one, they all have one. It's really, where do you want to go? What is that North Star? And some of it's fluffy and doesn't make any sense, but you have one that really makes sense. It can really align for the company and a person, but it's also, to your point that you mentioned earlier, like it's just being aware. It's really being, a vision statement is really about being aware. And so I realized for Leave Law Behind that it was my vision that Leave Law Behind is on this earth to help unhappy attorneys realize there's a better way. There is a better way. And then I realized that may be my vision for me. And so literally just writing that yesterday morning up early just solidified and crystallized a lot for me. I took a lot of weight off of me. So for me, though, I had a lot of needs that I had to do it a certain way, and I would focus on tactics, which marketing program and which this and which that. And I wasn't doing the upstream inner work about what it is. And I thought I did. I was like, well, I want to help unhappy attorneys and I want to make a lot of money and I want to work from the beach. But then that can all happen. But I hadn't answered the why. And the good thing about answering the why is that it's almost like an accountability partner, because when you lose it or you're in the midst of something or getting stressed, you go, hold on, why am I doing this? All right. I want to show people a better way. I want to show myself a better way. I mean, all the stuff I riff on here and make up on the spot is really just me trying to find a better way for myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't make it up. I just listen to other people and I come back here and say what they said. But I just I have been attached to succeeding in a certain way, the how, and I've really just recently gone up to the why, and I can't tell you how much better I feel.
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't give me the opportunity to skip that question, so I got to answer it myself.
No, it
But
doesn't.
I think for me, it's about learning how to let go to being attached to people. And in particular, thinking that just because a relationship is close in whatever the fashion might be, that it's the thing that I have to hang on to. It's that lifeboat that I've
Yeah.
got to hang on to for the rest of my life. And it's a process. It's more of a journey than I expected it to be,
Mhm.
because there is something about the physical connection with the other person that's, I mean, literally wired within the DNA to be a part of a tribe, to be a part of a group.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing now, it's funny because both of you notice as I'm planning out this trip, the theme that I want to explore is this concept of change. And in particular, like, how is change welcome in different cultures, and ultimately how can you learn from it? Well, the more that I started to focus on it, the more change I begin to experience in my life. Like now I'm all of a sudden, hyper focused on like the changes in the relationships, the changes in how I show up to certain people, the changes of what do people really mean in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what does it actually mean to have a connection? Let's face that. Is it really just me choosing to show up for the person and do X, Y, and Z activity and then just move on and go on with the rest of my day? Everyone gets to have their own meaning. Personally speaking, that's not enough for me.
Mhm.
Like I just know for a fact that if we're gonna, I don't know, if I'm gonna choose to be part of a group text with people, and I feel like my form of contribution is really not done through text, I'm not gonna do it. Plain and simple. Because I know consciously that that's not the best use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather, I'll drive to you and give you a bottle of wine, give you a present, whatever it is. Like, because that's the thing that drives me.
Mhm.
It's going that extra mile. To some people, to me, it's just like going the next step,
Yeah.
because that's all, I've already done that. I already know. So I think I'm at the beginning stages of it. It's hard.
Mhm.
It's very difficult because there are some people that I just know are not serving me at this chapter. It doesn't mean that they can't ever serve me or
Mhm.
can't ever be of service. But there is a time and a place for certain things. And I believe that I've just outgrown that time and a place with some people.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, they're not bad. They're not good. They just are. Not everyone wants the same thing. But I'm just realizing that it's like now, I don't even know how else to describe this to the two of you and everyone that's listening. But, the more that I reflect upon people that I really connect with and that I really trust, 99% of them I've never met in person.
Mhm.
I've never
Mhm.
met the two of you in person. I've never met Scott Mason in person. I've never
Yeah.
met Thomas in person. Nicole I might have met twice. So there's something to be said about being able to experience that level of connection through the virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where like the question of, okay, if that's true and your experience proved it to you to be true, why are you being attached to the physical part?
Yeah.
Why are you putting so much emphasis on the physical part when really you've been proven through experience that you've never met Casey Berman, but you feel like you've been connected to this guy for years?
Mm-hmm.
You've never met Nancy, but I feel like I've been connected to you for, I don't know, like
Mhm.
definitely longer than a year. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the next step is. I'm just letting it flow through me,
Mhm.
and awareness is the phase that I'm at.
Yeah.
What action that I choose to take from it, I have no idea. But I'm okay. I'm okay with the unknown. I'm okay with the fact that, maybe when I leave this state and this country to go travel abroad, that some of the relationships and connections might vanish. And that's just the truth. Like, that's not only is it the truth, but I think it's probably a reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a requirement or a belief that you need to have that physical contact, that you need to shake hands, that you need to be in the same city to have a thriving relationship? It could be a belief that technology and virtual, regardless of what Zoom says, isn't equivalent, and it's technology never suffices. I mean, there may just be a belief you have that makes you swim in the water, swim in the belief system, that in person good, anything else subpar, right?
And it's conditioned thinking.
It's conditioned. Yeah.
It's 110% conditioned thinking. It's something that I've been taught from, young age, like I'll never forget this one remark my mom had made. I was running down the stairs. My bedroom was on the second floor of the house in Ann Arbor. And I was running down the stairs, 6th or 7th grade. And I was so excited to go play with my friend. And I told that to my mom, and she said, "How can he be your friend? You've only known him for a week, less than that." And that's a situation that I haven't let go of, because it puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
Like here, because there it implied that your friend had to be in this package box form. If you don't see them on the playground, how can they be your friend? If you don't high five, if you don't see each other in other circumstances, how can you really have a connection with someone? And I think it's about letting go of that belief and thinking that, okay, just because we're not playing with the same toys in the sandbox, it doesn't mean that we can't have a connection.
Well, I mean, think about people in the 1800s who wrote letters to each other and connected and had great relationships through old school mail. I mean, so that was the Zoom back then. That was the email back then, the old school paper post, right?
Yeah.
The other thing with relationships is, and I heard this recently, is that it's either transactional or transformational. And both are okay. But some are just transactional. And that's just what it is. It's a quid pro quo, and there's nothing wrong with it. Some are transformational. The ones that are transformational are the ones where that person, this is why people hire coaches or really connect with people, they get something from that person. They pull in a good way, not in a parasitic way, but in a symbiotic way, right? They're able to pull energy from that person, and it grows in them, and that person isn't depleted. That person just keeps growing his or hers. So that really helped me understand. And a transformational relationship might become transactional at a time, and it just morphs. But if that's the case, it doesn't really matter if you're in person or not. So, I mean, I have a transformational relationship with Alan Watts, who died, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, he's a British philosopher who brought Zen to the West Coast in California in the 70s. I mean, I listen to this guy almost every day. I mean, I'm just listening to him through the vibrations of the internet. I feel like I know him.
Yeah.
So
how do you feel about our connection, in complete honesty?
Yeah, I mean, it's transformational. I mean, I'm doing things based on what practices that you're doing, that you told me to do, the weekly accountability, look at him. I'm talking, I'm public speaking more. My wife said, "You're on another podcast?" I was, "Yeah, it's Oleg's." She's like, Oleg, the podcast guy. I was like, "Yeah, podcast guy, Oleg." But
podcast guy.
Yeah, so you're transforming
after this.
Yeah, you're transforming me. Podcast guy. Yeah, that's what my wife calls you.
It's a good tagline. It's a good tagline, podcast guy.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's also that, it might also be, again, it's this idea of either or all or nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if all of our relationships all of a sudden went to virtual, maybe that might be a bit more of a challenge. Like that might be more problematic, especially if you think about that we do as humans value a physicalness, a touch, like it's just something that's there for us, even if it's just that presence. There's this energy exchange that happens when you're physically together. So I feel sometimes it's that do they all have to be like that? No, to Crazy's point, like something goes from, just like something might go from transactional to transformational to transactional, your relationships can also ebb and flow in that way. We're lucky to live in a time where we have access to all of this technology that allows us to connect in so many different ways, like connect in the sense from a superficial to a very deep level in so many different ways. Like, so to your point, Oleg, like, as you travel, I think the cool thing is as you travel, you'll probably experience all levels of that, because you are going to be this kind of sojourner through like all these different things where you have a life that you are leaving, where you'll have relationships that you're connected to. Then you have relationships like ours, where we have always been virtual, which may stay exactly that way unless you come by Canada and maybe we meet in person. I have no idea, so it just kind of ebbs and flows in that way. So I do think the idea that we're in a time where we have the luxury of the options of how we have relationships. So it might just be that too, where you may still value, and that's something as you think through it, like you may still value a physicalness to some relationships, but they may actually end up being relationships that you don't currently have. They may be new ones that you generate, whereas the ones that you have. So I think it's a combination.
The options. I like that. Like you have options. You can have virtual friends and in-person friends and hybrid friends and
and let go of some friends.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. And as long as I as long as I continue staying the podcast guy, I'll be good. I'll have plenty of friends.
I know, that's awesome. Podcast guy. I like it. Yeah.
No, it's true. No, you're transformational, man. Really, really. So,
Nancy, how would you describe our connection?
I really value it. So I've shared this with you before, so this is not new. I value your curiosity. I don't think I had ever met anyone before who really, and you mean it, like as in you and I don't agree on everything, right? So but it doesn't matter. Like I don't ever feel just because we have a different point of view that there's anything wrong with that. I just have really appreciated your ability to ask a question, to get curious about something that you don't know, you don't understand. And I've experienced in you a genuine curiosity. There's people who are, and it's not even a judgment, I've done this too. Sometimes you ask questions because you're like, I feel like this is a good time to ask a question. Like, good time to demonstrate something, a good question asking, right? But then when I was with you, I experienced a genuine kind of question. I'm just like, where the hell did that question come from? And I know that's like, so I appreciate that. And I think I really value that because it's expanded me. I walked away, especially after our one very first, very long conversation, the 3-hour thing, where I walked away going, how can I better demonstrate more curiosity? Like, how could I genuinely be curious about something? And I don't know that I've always valued curiosity, but I experienced it in a different level with you, which made me go, okay, how could I possibly do that as well? Like, how can I be more that way? So so in that way, you've shaped me to pursue something that I maybe might have done it more at a surface level. Yeah.
Curious podcast guy. This is what I'm walking away with.
That's what I think you should call yourself. Change your tagline.
This is what I'm walking away with.
That's your vision statement. That's your vision statement.
The curious podcast guy.
Curious guy.
What's that?
Curious guy.
Curious guy.
Obviously, well, first of all, I'm lucky to share this space with the two of you. and we can have this conversation for however long. Nancy's spot on. So brief story about that, Casey. Nancy and I connected, I think it was through another group, Humans First. I think we were talking about this the other day. And, we'd scheduled the podcast, literally stopped recording after 1 hour because we thought we could, and we felt like we could talk forever, just like you and I can, Casey. And so we stopped at an hour, and we ended up talking for a total of 3 hours. 3 hours.
2
there were
hours
so many points
after the 1 hour
during
podcast.
the 2 hours after the 1 hour podcast, where it was like, why did we not just why did we stop recording? We were having this profound conversation just about everything on the face of the earth, and getting to points where well, I don't know why it's like that. And then she'd be like, me neither. And we just kept going and go. And afterwards, I think both of us just had to go. I mean, just other commitments. And we're like, how did we just
have a life?
3 hours. But that's great. I think that speaks to the point, though, that at least for me, I really value people. I value people, and I the reason why I do that, and it's a choice that I make, is because I know what it was like to not be appreciated. I know what it was like to be in conversations and someone literally nods their head and does exactly what you described, Casey, wanting to ask the next question to appear X, Y, and Z way. Mm-hmm. The question may have nothing to do with what I said, but it's the fact that you ask the question, you appear more intelligent, you know this, I don't know that, blah, blah, blah. And there became a point for me where I just I don't want to do that. And I genuinely don't care is not the right set of words, but it gets the point across. It doesn't impact me greatly in knowing what do people, or how do people want me to live my life, and the questions that I ask. So I just started going a different route. I just started going a complete separate way. And there were years where people didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing what I was doing. But I just kept pushing through it. And I think having conversations like this, for me, at the end of the day, outside of any accomplishments, whatever, this is the thing that matters to me. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. It's this space, getting to know two of you outside of what you do, outside of Leave a Lot Behind and, leadership coaching and all this other stuff. Because and I don't want to put words into your mouth. All that stuff is great. It leads somewhere, right? It leads to that purpose. It leads to meaning. It leads to income, which can lead to experiences. And there's so many other things that it can lead to. But to me, it's this is more important, because now I get to see a different element or different side of you that I've never seen before.
When you put me in touch with Steve Gamlin. Board. Yeah. And first of all, thank you so much for the introduction. He and I spoke, and at the end of the 30 minutes, Nancy, if you haven't met Steve, you need to be introduced. And one thing was, Oleg's group. So not only are you curious podcast guy, but you're connector guy, in a great way, but curious podcaster and connector guy. But he said, we were talking, and we just connected right away. And so to your point about connection, what does that mean, connection? He goes, Casey, this was effortless.
Yes.
And to the point we mentioned earlier in the conversation about ease and what is luck if things are easy, so it just hit me when you were talking about relationships just now and us just talking beyond work and everything. It reminded me what Steve said. And I looked at it, I said, you're right. And so what makes this conversation so great, and why could you and Nancy talk for 3 hours total? It was easy. It was effortless. Yeah. The wind, the sail was pushing you, and you then had the energy. It was effortless.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's bang on. That idea of effortless is so okay. So again, coincidence. A friend posted today about this whole idea of relationships, and have you ever had relationships where you feel energized and then other ones where you're like, oh, like it's like a grind thinking about it. It's a grind being in it, and then you're like, when is this thing over? Like, when are we done? I agree. Like, that's what it is. Like, there's some. I loved how you said that. When a connection is effortless, you're like, that's when you know there's like a spirit connection.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a soul connection has happened where you're that, and I think that's the energy component that I feel. And again, it doesn't mean anything bad about anybody if you don't have that. Like sometimes it's just when it's effortless, it just means I don't have to think about it. We just have it's almost like we left off somewhere a long time ago and we've just started up. That's kind of how it is. So I really like that.
Maybe we don't need to understand it. Maybe it's the universe doing it.
Yeah.
It's it's just coming out of nowhere, and it's just luck.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, with that said, where can people connect with you? Casey, I'll start with you.
LeaveLawBehind.com is my business where I help unhappy attorneys to leave the law, and I'm just dedicated to helping these people who I was one years ago who feel trapped in a career they thought was going to be a fit for them, and now it's not. And so helping them find alternative careers out of the law. So you can find me there, LeaveLawBehind.com.
And Nancy, what about you?
Yep. So you can find me. My company is Seed Leadership, and my website you can see scrolling at the bottom there, seedleadershipdevelopment.com. I really support leaders who are either in transition or moving between leadership roles. I'm focusing a little bit more on working with introverted leaders because I find that being introvert myself, there's a lot of misconceptions around leadership for introverts, and I feel that there's support that can help to really develop them and build them up to be higher level leaders. So you can find me there. My website's there. One of the best ways to connect with me is on LinkedIn. You can just find me, look, Nancy John, you'll see my picture, and that would be a great place to connect with me.
What's the meaning behind seed? Can you explain that?
Yeah, actually it was a friend of ours who helped us come up with that name. And it started off just with that. It's the idea of, like, when you think about the idea of something developing from the ground up, there's a component of a newness of something. There's a component of a letting go of something. If you think about a seed, it's actually also sometimes just a letting go. Like, it's planted and it becomes something else, but it's no longer that seed. So there's a transformation component associated with it. So it really is. I love hearing what people get when they hear that, because everyone has when they hear that, there's a different connection they have to it. And all of those connections make sense.
And I can relate to that. I think for me, what I started to believe in is I'm a seed to someone else's garden.
Yeah.
And so whether or not they choose to water it and let it spread, that's completely up to them. So
yes.
Seed to someone else's garden and curious podcast guide. Those are my two takeaways from this conversation today. So outside of everything that we spoke about, those are the two things. But
That's
it was
right.
a fantastic conversation. Thank you
great.
to both of you.
No, thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, just thank you for being a part of my life and impact and the influence that you have. And I'm not even going to say I hope, because I know I do it. I do express it to the two of you. Someone said to me once upon a time that hope is not a plan. And I just found that so profound. So I just started to commit these things into action. Like, if I'm feeling grateful about something, I'll share it with you. I'll call, text, message, email, whatever. And I think there's just something to be said about it. So just the two of you continue to be in that and continue to play a big role within my life and everything that you do.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Honored.